away, I would like to welcome all present to our third session for this photography workshop. Our host has graciously returned for our third and final session. Let me introduce to those who are joining us today, architect Amit Chatterjee, who will be hosting today's session. Now, before we begin, one note, everybody can ask their doubts in the who are present in Zoom can post their doubts in the Zoom chat, and for those of you who are watching on YouTube can post it in the YouTube chat box. Once the lecture has concluded, there will be a question answer session, during which time the host will answer all of your doubts. So you can ask it during in between the lecture or at the end. Either is fine, but it will be answered at the end of the lecture. So please wait till the end for having your doubts cleared. With that being said, I welcome you once again, Architect Amit, and
Thank you.
let's begin.
Uh, all right. So, a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the third and the last module of our presentation on Introduction to Photography. So, I'll just brush you through what we had studied before. We have in our first lecture, we studied about the introduction to photography. We spoke about various genre of photography that's there, and we spoke about what are the characteristics of each genre of photography that we have. Then in the second module, which was about introduction, which was about technicalities of photography, we spoke about various camera components. What do they do? Uh, to know your camera better, what does the button in your camera does, what camera does what are the plus and minus of DSLR, what is the difference between a DSLR and a bridge and a mirrorless, and all of that. Then towards the next second part of the second session, we spoke about the lenses. So we started talking about different modes that are there. We started talking about what are the lenses that are there, right from starting from wide angle lens to telephoto lens to normal fixed angle lens or fixed focal length lens, which are also known as block lenses. And so basically last module was more about the technicalities. It was especially for people who own a camera or who would like to get a camera in near future, for them to know their particular machine or the particular equipment properly. This particular module will talk mainly about the compositional skills. Now, if you talk about this particular module, I say this is more important than any of the modules that we have covered till now. Introduction to photography or the genre of photography, or may it be the components and the cameras that we were talking about. They were certain aspect that you can own up to, or you can have it in your future. Composition skills is something that you need to have or you must have as a photographer. Uh, and this is something that you don't, let's say, for example, for a camera, you might have to invest something on it. For a composition skills, to learn composition, all you have to do is invest your time into it and learn and start seeing photographs and start understanding the frames and things like that. So what we will do is this particular module will teach you how to start thinking or how to start seeing like a photographer, rather than considering yourself as a photographer all beforehand. So having said that, we will start with the third module, which will talk about the compositional skills and the rules and things like that that is there in photography. Now, this holds good for anyone. If you have a DSLR, you are blessed, well and good. If you do not have a DSLR, even your phone camera can do the same thing as a DSLR. Because when it comes to composition, the equipment really doesn't matter. It's the person behind the camera and his or her style of photography, his or her, the rules that he or she is implying in the photographs. That is what matters. And believe me, that is what is the most important part of photography. And that is why As I said in my first class, some of the recent major international photography competitions, the winners have been declared who have taken photographs with just simple smartphone camera. But again, you need to look beyond, the pixels, or you need to look beyond the resolution of a photograph. You need to see what the photograph is communicating to you. So that is what is more important. And the composition skills or the rules we will be talking about will hopefully will teach you all of that. So we will begin with that. Before I start, I think a very happy world architecture to all of you. uh, so let's start with our presentation. Just a second. Okay, I'll just need a confirmation if my screen is visible. Uh,
Yes, it's
yes?
visible.
Okay. So today is the module 3. And in module 3, we will be talking about, as I said, the composition. Having said that, let's start let's begin first saying what exactly is composition. What do we mean when we talk about composition? So in this, with regard to photography, I will say composition is something that will start making you to feel like a photographer, or to start thinking like a photographer. Basically, you will start thinking as if you are not just looking at some kind of scenery, or you are not looking at just a person, you are looking at him or her or the scenery as a frame. So you need to start looking at everything like a frame. You must have seen directors, and old movies, they used to mock up directors, like they used to keep doing this, or they used to keep doing this. That's basically, they are talking about the frame that they are talking about, right? That they want to see everything in terms of frame. So that became a mock-up thing for them. It's the same way. If you want to see something, start looking at it in terms of frame. You don't have to do this all the time, but whatever you are looking at, look at it as a frame. That how will it look when it is printed, or when it comes up as a photographer, when it comes up as a photograph. It's obvious that the way your eye looks at with 150-degree angle is different than how your camera will look at with whatever lens is mounted on it, whether might be a might be a telephoto lens, might be a wide angle lens, might be a 85 block lens. It doesn't matter. It what it matters is what the frame is communicating to you. So that is what is composition. Having said that, if you go in the literal meaning of composition, definition wise, it just talks about, if you have to simply put it, it is just an image, meaning uh, an image means arranging elements within it in a way that suits the core idea or goal of your work base. So basically, in a photograph, let's say you have 3 or 4 arrangements or 3 or 4 elements. How do you, where do you keep what, and why do you keep that particular element over there? That is the whole idea of composition in a photography. Having said that, these are not really hard and fast rules, because as I said, had may be in architecture, or may be in photography, or may be in fine arts, the rules are meant to be broken. But these are the kind of how do you say, the theories that we will talk about have been tried out for thousands of years, and people have got decent result with it. We will talk about each of those rules and thumb rules that we have. But having said that, do not take anything for granted. Even these rules can be broken, or some of the great photographers, they break these rules to achieve something new. So there is no hard and fast rule like what should it should be, or you have to use rhythm, or you have to use pattern, or something like that. It depends completely on the person, what he or she wants to click, or what he wants to communicate to the viewer. So as I said, these are not hard and fast rules, but just guidelines. And many of them have been used in art for thousands of years, and they really do help achieve more attractive compositions. So we will go to the next slide, which will talk about the first rule that we often, or the most, how do you say, common rule that we often see in photography, and that's the rule of thirds. Now, many of you must have come across this rule. Many of you are new to this terminology. I came across this terminology back in 2000. I think 12 or so. Before that, I was just clicking with my father's camera. I used to click anything and everything that I liked or I found interesting. Uh, Especially, it used to be portraits of my family members, or if we have gone to some picnic or something, we'll just take photographs of landscape and things like that. But I never really gave a thought to rule of thirds, or I did not know. It's just in 2012 when I came across this rule called rule of thirds, and from that, I can guarantee that my photography has notched up a bit, because now when I compose my photographs, I do think about composing it in the rule of thirds. Now, what exactly is rule of thirds? So basically, if you take a frame and if you divide it in one third and two third vertically, as well one third and two third horizontally, you will get these points, these 4 points that you can see in your screen. You will get these 4 points. So basically, the rule of third is somewhat like a most basic of all photography rules. Okay, it's all about dividing your shot into 9 equal sections by set of vertical and horizontal lines, the way it has been shown on your screen, with the imaginary frame in place. That means the white is the imaginary plane that we have. None of these lines or anything exist. These are just imaginary. Just a quick tip. Some of you might even have this rule of third grid lines in your camera as well as in your mobile phones. You can set it. There will be a setting option where you can set it to this, so that it will not reflect on your photograph, but when you are clicking on your eyepiece, whatever you are seeing, the viewfinder, whatever you are seeing, it will have this grid line, so that it will be easy for you to arrange. So it's a technique that works well for landscape, as well as you can position the horizon on one of the horizontal lines and sit in the lower upper part of the photograph while you are vertically subject. So basically, when you're using this, the rule of third talks about three things. Number one, when you are clicking landscape, when you are clicking any of the landscape, always try to keep the horizon in any one third of it. Okay, so if you are clicking a landscape photograph, always try to keep the horizon on the one third, and let the sky be the rest two third. This is a compositional skill. This is a compositional skill that photographers use, and they get quite a good result with it. The second part that the rule of third talks about is the four dots, the intersection points of the four one third are very vital, because most of the time your eyes get this, because most of the time your eyes get attracted to this four intersection point. So this is how your eye scans according to the rule of third. So whenever you are looking at a picture, you will always go to the 41% of the time, you will always go to the topmost corner. That means in a photograph there might not be any lines or anything, but you will always go towards that. You will start looking at the photograph like that, right? So over there it is almost 41%. Over here it is almost 25%, the bottom left corner. Over on the top right corner it's 20%, and on the bottom right corner it's 14%. So these are the cardinal points, so these are the intersection points that a human eye usually hunts for in a photograph, if whether or not these particular lines are there or not. All right, so now I will show you some of the examples in which this such kind of photography has been done, keeping this one third rule in mind. So look at this particular portrait. You can see the lady's face has been put on the one third, the intersection of the particular right hand side top corner intersection. So similarly, if you can see over here in a landscape photography, the sun here is the focal point. So you want the person to focus on that. Hence, you will put that in one of this intersection. Now, the person, if the composition allowed, could have kept the particular sun on the left hand side intersection also over here, but he has chose to keep it over here. So that's completely up to the photographer's choice where he wants to keep his subject. But what is more important is keeping the subjects in either one of these points, or one of these points, or one of these points, or this point. Which point to keep, Or if you have to, let's say for example, if you have the freedom or liberty that you can keep the subject in any of these 4 points, then I think you should go for this, where you can understand that mainly majorly our human eye hunts for the left side top corner, that is 41% we go there, and similarly 25% over here, 20% over here, and 14% over here. So this will guide you where do you want to keep your subject. Some of the time you might be bound, like this particular person, maybe he was bound, so he had to keep the sun on the right side top corner. But if having a choice, you can keep it on the left side top corner also. So that depends on the photographer and the scene that he is capturing. Now, even to capture the rule of thirds, there are certain rules. So there are certain tips. So first thing is you should avoid clutter. Now, when we say avoid clutter, this always means that try to not include things which do not have any, how do you say, weightage in that particular frame. Let's say for example, if you are clicking a photograph of a person, or if you're clicking a photograph of an old guy, do not try to add in useless things in it so that the focus completely gets away from the particular person. So you need to avoid those clutter. Next is always try to create a dynamic range. Now, how can you create a dynamic range? It's only by focusing, or it's only by composing your elements in a particular way. The third thing talks about prevent a divide in your photograph. That means already the frames are being divided in 9 parts. Do not divide it further, because dividing it further is just going to create a confusion for the viewer to know which is the part that you want to focus on. So it's always necessary, or it is always preferable that you keep your photographs in either of these 4 corners. Now we will just go through some of the examples of this kind of photograph so that you will know what exactly I am talking about. This is a wildlife photography where the photographer has focused on the bird, but he has chosen to keep the bird somewhere on the bottom left intersection point. So you can see how the particular subject has been kept over there. Now imagine this particular photographs without any grid lines. That is how the photographs will be. This lines that is there on your screen is just for your reference to understand how the one-third rule has been used. Also, one more thing, you can see that over here, you can see that entire horizon is on the one-third. If you see the entire horizontal one-third line over here, it's not that in a one-third rule, you will just focus on these intersections. You will preferably keep your subjects in this intersection, but as a photographer you should always try to use these lines also. So in this photograph, the horizon has been kept in the one-third line and the sky has been kept in the two-third line. This is one very famous, how do you say, rule from landscape photography point of view. We always try to capture sky in the two-third area, and the bottom one-third will have the horizon and the land and things like that. That is, so next time when you're clicking, obviously by default we click photographs like that, but sometimes also we do 50-50. So it's always here 33% and here 66%. That is how you should try to compose your photograph if you want to follow one-third rule. Um, this one-third rule is not just for wildlife photography or for landscape photography, it's for portrait photography too. So many a time you will see photographers using one-third rule to focus or to keep an eye somewhere in this intersection points. Let's say for example, this particular portrait has this eye on the particular point that we were talking about, which attracts almost 41% of the attention of a viewer. So even over here, when we are talking about, let's say for example, the photographer had a choice. He could have kept the eye somewhere over here or somewhere over here or somewhere over here, but he chose that because this is what one-third rule following looks like, and this gives a dynamic range. Because suddenly the moment you look at this photographs, I'll just go back and come back to the photograph and you try to understand where are you focusing. Let's say for example, we'll just see this photograph 3 seconds. Check this now. The moment you will understand or you will realize, the moment you are looking at the photograph, you are first looking at the eye that has been put in the intersection. By default it will happen. It's a human tendency that the eye will directly go to that particular point only. And that is what is the rule of third, is that you will use that advantage to your photographs. You will use that to compose your photographs, so that you can compose your photographs keeping your vital elements of your composition in this particular four intersection points, or use the horizontal or vertical lines to align them. Again, this is one more classic photograph of silhouette. We all love taking silhouette photographs. So this is one more classic example where the person has been put on the bottom, the person has been put on the right top corner intersection. And here you can see the overall composition has been a little more, how do you say, taken down, because of which you will see this particular line, the horizontal line, is not actually matching the one third. So maybe because he wanted to create, or he wanted to capture this, he had to take this down. So as I said, the entire one third of rule is not a hard and fast rule. This is just for your reference. You can use it to as much as you can use it as much as you want to, but somewhere where you have to break. Let's say, for example, if he had to really take this up and keep the horizon on this line, it would have been really good, but he would have missed out on this particular texture of the sky. So maybe because of that, he has broken that part of the rule, but he has kept this part of the rule intact. Similarly, in wildlife photography, you will see people composing the tiger, the lion, the elephant, their eyes, their movement, and things like that. They will capture it, trying to capture it in the one third rule itself. Again, in landscape, you will see where he is keeping the element. So it's always, and this particular option is available in your phones. If you take out your phone and if you fiddle with the grid lines, it will tell you what kind of grid lines do you require. Do you require grid lines according to one third rule? Do you require grid lines according to the division of it in 9 formats or 10 formats or 12 formats, depending on the camera that you have? But if you are trying to follow one third, you can just set your grid lines to one third rule, and then you can take photographs. It will be much easier because the screen will have these two lines, and you can almost arrange however you want, and then take the photograph and try to put all your elements in those four corner points or four intersection points. The next point that we will talk about, this is something that is easy, I say easy for architecture students, because this is something that we all have already studied, principles of design. We have studied Francis D. Kitching's form, space, and order, and it talks about all the principles of design that is there. Lucky for us that these principles of design hold good for photography too. So this will be one module that will be easy for architecture fraternity to understand, or for architecture students and architects to understand, rather than for normal person to understand, because he has to understand the what exactly the principle design says to apply it in photography. Whereas when it comes to us, we already know what that principle of design is. So it will be just like applying that principle in terms of photographs. So basically, just to give you what exactly is, these are the rules designer must follow to create an effective and attractive composition. And the fundamental principles that we have is basically emphasis, balance, alignment, contrast, repetition, proportion, movement, and white space. So first we will talk about balance, because this is one of the most common principle of design that many architects use in their buildings. Now we will understand how to use it in terms of photographs. So basically, this is used to illustrate the visual weight of an image. Let's say, for example, there is some kind of a frame where you want to show how visually empowering it is. You will try to create a balance in it. Most of the time, lot of time, when we are taking picture of Taj Mahal, you will see a lot of people going to Taj Mahal and taking a front shot, which will be like Taj Mahal right in the middle. That is also to show balance into the picture. So it is used to illustrate the visual weight of an image. It can either unite a photograph or create division in a photograph. A careful balanced image lends a sense of stability to a photograph, and an unbalanced image creates a disunity or unrest. So even while taking photograph in terms of balance, you can either have it, you can either make the photograph very stable by clicking something which is completely symmetrical and the balance is completely intact, or you can completely distort a complete photograph by using balance also. So there are two ways of using balance. You can either unite the photograph or you can completely divide the photograph. That completely depends on the photographer, what he wants to communicate or what he wants to show. This is a classic photograph. We love taking photographs of this rail tracks, and I have seen many of them. This is not my photograph. This is a photograph from one of the website, and even over here you can see the photograph has been completely divided. Okay, we have seen balance being used to unite a photograph in a lot of things. Let's say, for example, in this example, the balance have been used to unite a photograph. That means the balance is used to show that the bridge is unit, it's a whole unit, and how the entire bridge is one. But over here the balance has been used to divide the photograph. So basically this particular way of showing the photograph divides the frame into two frames. So actually a person can view this photograph in a complete two different. If you keep your palm on one side and completely close it and see just the other side, you can still see a kind of photograph which will be a asymmetrical photograph. But because they are put together and this particular frame has come up, this completely uses balance but to divide the photograph. So that is how you can use balance. I will not go into detail about what is balance and how do you use it and why do you use it and all of that, because we as architects already know about these principles of design. I will just give you the examples of how to use this same principle in photograph. And believe me, this is what is one of the major how do you say advantage that the architects have in the field of photography, that we already understand these principles, and because of which lot of architects are known. We can see some of the photographs of some photographer and tell maybe he's from architecture field or maybe he's from interior design field, because they will love to use balance, repetition, symmetry and all of this principle in their photographs, because that's the advantage that we have. The next one talks about rhythm. Now, we all know about this principle of design. It is a composition that happens in music. And as I said, music, fine arts, photograph, all of them are linked together in the same art domain. So the photographic concept of rhythm borrows heavily from music theory. And just like musician reading the notes on a sheet of music, subjects in a space regulate the way we view a photograph. So basically, it will be the subjects, it will be the components in the photograph that will regulate us to understand this as a photograph which has, how do you say, which is showing rhythm into the picture. The rhythm dictates the recurring and or organized or disorganized distribution of visual elements throughout an image. In this particular image that is there on your screen, it has been disorganized, but still you can see this particular element in certain interval of time, and that creates a kind of rhythm, but a disorganized rhythm. The next example that I will give will be an organized rhythm. So you can see the flowers are there, there is some pattern to it, but they are not very clear what pattern they are talking about. And the same thing, if you see this again, right over here you can see a kind of rhythm that's been created. But again, the photograph has been taken in a way that the rhythm is not organized, but instead it is disorganized rhythm. But again, you can see the rhythm has been there. And also, just a matter of fact that it's not required that you can use only one principle at a time in a design. Let's say, for example, or sorry, in a photograph. Let's say, for example, in this particular photograph, one third rule also has been used. If you can see this particular photograph, the place where all four of the guys are standing has this one third rule. So one third of the frame has been divided in that where the ground is, and the rest one third is where the other part of the photograph comes into picture. So you can use multiple principles of design or multiple theories of photography in one photograph. No issues with that. It's just like architecture, as we know that in architecture when we are designing, we need not only focus on one particular element. You can have multiple elements in your design. It's the same thing in photography. You can have multiple elements in your design too. The next one we will talk about is pattern. Now, when we talk about pattern, it's something that makes sense of a visual world through regularity. That means there will be a regularity in terms of this texture, and that is what is known to us as pattern. For man-made objects to organic materials and to abstraction, you will find patterns in almost everything in and around you. A pile of books can be a pattern. A pile of egg crates can be a pattern. Um, Soil can be a pattern. So you can look for pattern in almost everything. Another elements of design can be organized in a predictable manner to form a pattern. Put simply, pattern are repetitions of the elements of art and design. This works is unison within a single frame. That means we will be basically using the same elements of a design repeatedly in one frame, and that will create pattern for us. Let's say, for example, this is a classic example of pattern, the beehive. So you will have this hexagonal structures repeating in the same frame again and again and again. So that becomes the example of pattern. The next one talks about emphasis. Now, this is something portrait photographers use a lot. Emphasis basically shapes the center of interest in an image. So, if you have an image with a blurry background or something like that, that means the emphasis you are trying to create, or you are trying to focus on certain point, and you are trying to create the emphasis on that particular subject. This emphasis can be created in terms of color. It can be created in terms of space, texture, line, anything. So there are many ways to create this emphasis in a photograph. Spatial emphasis involves the orientation of a subject within the photographic frame. It's a, for example, if you are taking a photography frame which has space into it, or which is just taking framing a space into it, then you can have a various subject that can take the entire focus onto it, and that can be the emphasis. I think last time when we were talking about certain architects photographs and certain famous photographs, I have shown you the photographs of Ivan Ban, and he uses emphasis a lot. He uses emphasis and he uses pattern too. So you can go and check out his photographs, Ivan Ban, Iwan and Baan. So he is a photographer whom you should follow if you want to know how emphasis can be used in a photograph. A lone subject located in the center of an image will attract attention. So this is something that, as a child we always used to do. Anything that we like, let's say, for example, if it is an insect, or if it is a flower, or if it is a leaf, or any subject that we want to click, we used to always try to keep the subject in the middle of the frame and take the photograph. That is exactly what emphasis is all about. So even unknowingly we were trying to create emphasis in the photographs. Now that you know what emphasis is, I'm pretty sure you will use it to a better cause. Again, the same thing, when you're taking photograph, the background gets completely blurred out and the particular subject comes into the front, and the crisp line or the focus on that particular subject creates the emphasis. For example, in this shot, the photographer, I think, wanted to focus completely on the subject. That is why he has kept the subject right in the middle, not following the rule of one third, but creating a emphasis. So it, again, not every photograph needs to have emphasis, or not every photograph needs to have one third rule. It depends on the photographer what he wants to communicate. Over here, I think for the photographer, one third rule was not so evident as much as showing the emphasis on the photography was. That is why he has shown emphasis on this particular subject. The next one comes is contrast. Now this is something that I think one of our favorite and most easy principle to understand is what contrast is. Luckily, this particular principle is there in photography too, and it is created when two or more opposing elements are present in a photograph: light against dark or warmth against cool. So the photograph on your right talks about the light against dark, where you have there is a lot of way you can create the contrast. All right. So let's say, for example, in this particular subject, You can see again the one third rule has been followed. The entire horizon is kept in one third, and the two third is the sky. But here the contrast, you'll say, so where is the contrast? The contrast is in terms of the color scheme. This is a warm color scheme. This is a completely cool color scheme. So that is where the contrast comes into picture. This tells you that this is soft and sky, and that this is light and this is cool. This is on the other way. This is talking about rough surfaces, sand, yellow, ochre yellow, and this is what the contrast is. Now, this particular contrast over here has been used in a different way. You can use contrast in different ways when you're taking photographs. Let's say, for example, a photojournalist can take beautiful frames with contrast. Let's say, for example, there is a rich kid and there is a very poor kid right in the street, and you can take a photograph in a way that shows the contrast in the same frame. So it need not be all the time that you will think about contrast in terms of black and white, or cool and dark, sorry, cool and warm, or you will think about light and shadow. It's not only that. You can also be philosophical about it. You can also communicate some how do you say, hidden message in the photograph also. But that again depends on the eye of the photographer, what he wants to communicate, how he wants to show it. There are a lot of this Times magazine where the cover page comes out and they talk about stack reality. That can be an example of contrast too. So yeah, it depends on the person how he wants to use this particular principle in his design, in his photographs. So you can use contrast. The next one is unity. Again, as I said, the unity can be a principle that a lot of macro photographers use this. Unity describes the visual relationship between elements in photograph, and it helps create a cohesive image. That means it creates an image where the whole visual weight is there on that particular element only. Over here in this particular photograph that you are seeing on your right, you will see one third rule has been followed, but in a very how do you say, deceptive manner. You can see one third rule somewhere over there, but not properly. But the emphasis or the unity, the way the entire structure has been, and always you will see it is very easy if you had using triangles, triangular form. It is very easy to show unity in a picture. So even over here you can see there is a triangle. If in a virtual way you can see a triangle over here, right? So that gives unity to that entire particular subject. Now, using similar color tones, concept elements cultivates a sense of unity. Over here again the same thing, you can see a triangle. Most of the time unity, it is best described if you keep the particular subject in the middle of the frame rather than keeping it towards any of the side of the frame. If you can keep it in the middle of the frame, you will be able to show unity in a much better way. Now, when we do photography courses or when we do workshop on photography, we do ask these people to take this images. Let's say, for example, today we told them about all the 5 or 4 ways of photographs, ways of principles of photography, and things like that. Then we ask them to go out and start clicking photographs, keeping those principle in mind. Let's say, for example, I'll tell you, go out for half an hour and give me 5 photographs on unity. So then your eyes will hunt for things that can showcase unity, right? That is the practice that a photography student does. That is the practice that I will ask all of you to do after this course is done, because if you just look at these photographs and just listen to me, this will not going to help you. It's only going to help you when you start putting it into your practice. So next time you are taking photograph or something, just you can, usually we just take a photograph. Next time maybe you will think, okay, fine, let me try this one third rule and see how the photograph is. You will see a drastic change in your photography. Similarly, Sundays, weekdays, you can just go out and start clicking photographs. Let's say today, let's take photographs on balance and rhythm, and you and your friends can just go out, spend 2-3 hours, have a good time, and take photographs, and then come back and judge your own photographs. In the same spot, a person X would have taken different photographs than a person Y, and when you look at each other's photograph, you learn from that. So that is how the photography workshop are. That is how it is taught. and it's very much how do you say interesting, or it's fun to do that, because suddenly start looking at the world in a complete different way. You start looking at the world in terms of, unity, balance, symmetry, and all of that. So the next thing is movement. Now this is one thing that will lead to another feature. This will be the last principle of design or principle of photography, but this will lead to another, how do you say, tips of photography, that will be the leading lines. For now, just understand movement. The term movement in photography often describes the relationship between camera shutter speed and the subject. When it comes to art and design, movement refers to path viewers eye takes while reading a photograph. And in this particular photograph that is there on your screen, the patterns on the leaf, that is there on your leaf, is actually telling you where to look, or it is actually guiding your eyes towards the eye which is there placed in the middle. So that is what the movement actually is talking about. So movement is shaped by elements and principles of art and design. A photographer can take control of the way a viewer absorbs a photograph. Again, a classic example of how movement can be shown in a photograph. And these lines that you see, the lines that you are seeing here all the time, are known as leading lines. Now we will talk about that in the next part, when we are talking about in the second part of this particular photography composition skills. We will talk about what leading lines do. So for now, this can show the movement. Usually in movement, we use shutter speed a lot. Let's say, for example, you must have seen those shutter speed where the tail lights of the cars are seen in red and yellow. So that is again a part of the shutter speed. The next point is the golden ratio in photography. Now, this is something that we need to understand. What exactly is a golden ratio? Something that we have already studied, Fibonacci series and things like that. I'm pretty sure you have already studied. So this talks about, it is a design principle based on the ratio of 1 to 1.618, and this is hailed as the perfect number. So that is what golden ratio talks about. Now, we are not here to talk about golden ratio, but we are here to talk about what exactly golden ratio, does in terms of photography. So in a Fibonacci spiral was created from for a series of square uh, using Fibonacci numbers, with the length of each square being Fibonacci number. Now, we need, if you go into the technicalities, you will see the ratio and numbers coming into picture. But when we are taking photographs, we do not, obviously do not have this photographs, or we do not have these things. Okay, just one second. Rohit, are you there? Hello.
Yes, I'm here.
Rohit, just one second. I'm getting a very important call. I'll just attend that. Sorry for the disturbance. I'll just mute myself for just 1 minute.
Fine.
Okay, so we will continue. Sorry for the disturbance. I was getting a call from someone. So basically, using the spiral as a tool to compose photographs, we will see how a viewer be led around the image in a natural flow. So this is another picture which shows the juxtaposition of two theories at once. One is one-third rule and another is the golden ratio. So in the same particular of the subject, you can see, the person has already used a golden ratio, where the cap from the head of the particular person If you take an entire spiral, this is completely taking up to the end of this corner of the particular photograph. At the same time, you can also use it for 1/3 rule, where where you can use it to showcase that the head of the person is on the right side top corner intersection. So that is again using the 1/3 rule. Famous, it's not that we have used 1/3 rule in terms of photographs. We have also used it in many of the famous artworks that have been created, like artworks like Mona Lisa, or if you talk about Last Supper. And there are many things that by Michelangelo, or if you talk about Antonio Gaudi's work, you will see Fibonacci series and golden ratio, as it was invented by Vitruvius, has been used in many of their classic works. So it is said that, the golden ratio has also been used as a nature's number sometimes. So you can use this in terms of photography. These are some of the examples that I will show you how this particular rule can be used in photographs. So this is one landscape shot that a person has taken, where obviously you can see the major part, the arches, has been put at the center of those circles, and then the entire curve takes care of the rest of the frame. In terms of, not just in terms of landscape and things like that, you can use it for portrait too. In fact, many of the professional photographers, when they are taking photographs, they use this particular rule to use that. Sometimes it's very hard to distinguish between 1/3 rule and a golden ratio. As I said, in this particular photograph, you must have seen that the golden ratio and the 1/3 rule is almost coming close to each other. So that is somewhere where you will have a little trouble understanding, whether uh, was it golden ratio used in this photograph, or was it 1/3 rule. But most of the time you will see that, I'll tell you, the trick is most of the time the focus on the eye will be a little aside from the 1/3 line. That means it's a golden ratio. If it was a 1/3 line, the 1/3 line would have fallen somewhere over here, right? This particular line must have been, but the focus is on the eye, but the eye is little away from the 1/3 line. That means it is golden ratio. That is the way you can figure out, whether it has been golden ratio has been used or 1/3 line has been used. The next one now, from here, what we will talk about, the till here what we spoke about were the rules of photography, the major three rules. One is the principles of design that you can use, the principles of photography. Second thing was 1/3 rule, and third thing was golden ratio. From now, what we will see, the next 6 or 7 thing will be all about the tips that you should keep in mind while taking photographs. The first thing is, always try to fill the frame. Or when you are trying to take a photograph, let's say for example you are away from something and you want to take a photograph, you can crop it, right? Now cropping is also known as filling the frame. Let's say for example, in this particular shot that we are talking about, if your shot is somewhere where it is far away, and the focus or the X factor on your subject is reducing, you can choose to reduce the frame. Okay, this is something that even the international photography standards for editing images allows you to do. So basically, there are some sets of rules that the International Photography Association has put up, uh, which talks about what and what cannot you do while post processing or editing your photographs. There are people who edit their photographs marvelously, and they almost make a complete different photograph out of the photography, but they are not considered good, or they are not considered ideal photographs, as too much of post production has been done or too much of post processing has been done. So in that terms, there are certain rules that you can use to or there are certain tricks, or there are certain tips that the International Photography Association has set up, that you can use to post process your photography, in which cropping is allowed. So you can crop out any part of your image, that is allowed from the post processing point of view. So when you are cropping, let's say for example, in this particular subject, that in the particular example of that I'm giving you, the left side, the subject is there, but the subject is little diluted, as it is not seen. What do you want to? First thing that we need to know is, what do we want to show in this photograph? We want to show the glare in his eyes. We want to show his mustache. What is the thing that we want to? We want to show the contrast that is there. What is the thing that we want to show? Second thing is that we need to ask ourselves is, in this particular photograph, whatever we are trying to show, is it properly shown, or can it be more emphasized? So if you think that no, it should be more emphasized, you can crop out. So that is what has been done in the next image next to it. So it has been cropped out, and suddenly you can see the difference between the two images, how the image is speaking to you more, how it the elements of the images is stacked and vital, and now it's completely vibrant, and your eyes just goes over there. At the same time, also one more thing I would like to point out is the 1/3 rule that you can see. The eye of the person has been kept on the 1/3 left top intersection point over here. So again, somewhere hiddenly, you must have used 1/3 or the somewhere or the other. You just have to figure out whether you're using it rightly or not. Similarly, again, cropping the subject. So over here, you must have seen that the hand in behind. Sometimes you have a control over a shot. You can make it. You can arrange for the shot and take shots. Sometimes it is impossible because it's happening at the moment you have no control over. Let's say, for example, in this particular case, you do not have any control over the person's hand behind, because maybe the person is trying to control the snake or hold the snake from attacking you. So you cannot actually, tell the person to take your hands off or something else. It's not possible all the time, but through cropping you can do it, and suddenly you will have the image will speak to you, and the image will get much more emphasized. Even in this particular shot, you can see 1/3 rule has been used. If you take imaginary 1/3 lines over here, you can see that 1/3 rule has been used over here. You can crop images to showcase drama in a particular picture or shot. You can crop images to showcase the style in a particular shot. You can crop images also. Even over here, if you see, 1/3 rule has been used. If you crop this in 1/3, 1/3, you can see 1/3 rule has been used somewhere over here. Over here there were so many clutters. As I was saying, try to avoid clutters if you want to focus on what you are trying to showcase in your photography. So again, this is a clutter. So by cropping, you can take out the clutter and you can make it really simplistic. Now when I'm talking about cropping, a lot of times I have seen my students cropping off the entire how do you say, head off, or sometimes they are cropping something and they are not aware of what they're cropping in the background, and that sometimes creates a lot of disturbance in a photograph. So even if you're cropping a photograph, you need to be careful about what exactly are you cropping out and what exactly are you trying to, because the moment you crop out something, the emphasis or the focus on the photograph will change from something to something else. So you need to know that by cropping out, where did the focus change? Now where is the person is going to look at? Let's say, for example, in this particular photograph, the cat, it could have been much better if the cat's ear was not cut over here, because of this. Now sometimes what happens is, because of this, the attention goes to that, and the attention from your subject, although this photograph is a really nice photograph, but because those ears have been chopped over here on top, I'm not able to take my eyes off that, and because of which the subject is getting diluted. That means I'm not able to give enough emphasis on that particular subject. So always try not to cut off any limb or any body part in a particular frame. I'll show you some of the examples so that you'll know unknowingly these mistakes happen and they spoil our shots. So it's very easy to crop something, but it is also a very how do you say, decisive responsibility of a photographer to understand what to crop and what not to crop. For example, over here, you can see this is how you should not crop a photograph. Okay, if you cut off this limb of this lady, although you want to create focus on the particular subject, but what will happen is by cutting off this completely gives a different image of this lady. But look at this now, when it is not cropped, you can see the texture, you can sorry, you can see the form of those fingers, and now this gives a complete different feel altogether. So always try not to cut off, insensitively. You need to be sensitive about what you're trying to cut it off. Right? Over here, try not to cut out things like hair style of a person, or sometimes ears of a person. Sometimes while we are focusing too much on the eyes, we forget to include the rest of the body into the picture, and we cut off the and we crop things. And especially this, I have seen my lot of people doing in their DPs, in their Facebook or Instagram DPs. They cut off certain things of their entire body just to show emphasis on something else. Let's say, for example, they want to show their face. They cut off a lot of things in the background, which all creates the focus on their face. Yes, but this also disturbs, and you need to be very sensitive about it to understand whether the photograph that has come out is nice or not. Especially while you are clicking landscape, never try to cut out the horizon, because this completely changes the whole feel of the subject. So never try and cut out the horizon of a landscape photography. Or even a wildlife photography, if you are trying to capture a tiger or lion, do not cut off the horizon. Try to include that, try to include the space in and around the subject. Don't just focus on the subject. That is also a part of photography, but that can be done in a very how do you say, sensitive manner. Another thing is, when you are clicking a series of photographs, if you are clicking a series of photographs, try to keep your cropping how do you say, guidelines same. If this is especially if you are clicking a lot of photographs of the same person. Rather, in the first example over top, you can see the cropping has been done, but the cropping has been done in a different way, right? So sometimes it is cutting off the limb, sometimes it is cutting off the head and things like that. Over here you can see more or less the cropping factor has been kept similar, so the entire subject is coming across to you, right? Or the entire subject is getting the emphasis that it deserves. So always try not to have a if you are cropping something, always try to crop it with a certain guidelines into it, if you are cropping a series of photographs. The next point talks about use of frames. So this is something that we use a lot. Photographers, especially architecture photographers, use a lot. So this is like, when we talk about frames, it is not about SS frames or MS frames or things like that. This is talking about any kind of how do you say, element that's engulfing certain things, right? That can be used as a frame. Let's say, for example, over here, the top element can be used as a frame. And again, I'll tell you, this particular thing is nothing but an example of balance too. This photograph is also an example of balance, and a balance which is unifying the object rather than dividing the object. So you can use frames, and you can have elements in middle of the frame that creates an emphasis on the photographs. Let's say, for example, over here, when you take out some photographs like this, if it has a natural frame and a now you can also have frames by creating you must have seen people doing this and then taking frames inside. You can do that. Those are little cliche, but you can do that. But most of the time, try to include, if there is any frame inside. Let's say, for example, the person could have stood right over here and taken the picture of the mountain. That could have been a different kind of picture, but because he came couple of steps back and tried to capture the mountain inside a frame, this became a very interesting photograph, right? So you can always always try to capture photographs within a frame. That is going to enhance the whole level of your photography. The same thing over here, you can see there is the frame over here, and the person is right standing, the silhouette of the person is right over here, right? Again, using 1/3 rule, you can see the 1/3 rule has been used, the bottom, right? So always try to look for unusual frames, and avoid cliche frames, like two people holding hand and then taking some photograph inside it and all of that. Those are fine, but those are very cliche, those are very normal. So try to take unusual frames, like a bridge, something like this, where a bridge is there and the whole photograph will differ, or the whole level of the photography will increase when you take such an frames like this. And someone who actually understands photography will be really awed by this particular photograph, because this is something that we don't see usually, and something when we don't see usual and something unusual comes out and it comes out so beautifully, people actually do like it a lot. So over here also you can see it's got couple of more principles being used. You can see leading lines over here on top. You can see one third rule being followed. You can see contrast being followed, and you can see a frame within a frame. So 3 to 4 principles being used in one single particular shot. So that is what makes it a great shot. And again, as I said, do not always judge a photograph by the first impression that you are getting. That is the first thing that we teach students when they are coming into photography. That do not just look at photographs that looks good to you. What looks good can be achieved by post processing also, but that again is not considered as an ideal photograph. So for you to have an ideal photograph, and for you to know how to take photographs properly, you should understand these principles and try to hunt for these principles whenever you are seeing some photograph. The more you can relate to these principles, the better the photograph is. These are again some examples of how to use frames within a particular structure. The next one is leading lines. Now, from the last 2 or 3 points where I have been talking about, leading lines, what are they? So basically, these are the lines that are there on your photograph that your eyes, no matter what, follows, right? So we use that to create certain emphasis on this particular subject. Let's say, for example, in this particular shot which is there, the lines on the bridges, the lines on the railings, the lines that is being created by the lamps, they all are they all are creating a perspective, and that entire perspective is taking your eyes to that subject, that is the couple which is there on the bridge. That is what leading lines does. So basically, it unconsciously, it is your eyes are drawn along these lines, and you can create these lines, or you can use these lines to emphasize or to focus on the subject that you want to showcase. For example, over here you can see the lines on the grass is actually being used as a leading lines to showcase or to focus on the palace or the structure that is there in the middle of the frame. So again, emphasis being created over here, leading lines are being created to give emphasis to that subject. So leading lines are going to help you create your focus, depending on which area or which sides, or where do you want to focus. Always try to look for these leading lines. These leading lines can be found everywhere. You do not need to create leading lines. You can find them naturally. You just have to have an eye for it. Let's say, for example, over here, again, the same example, bridge, railings, they all are creating leading lines in terms of visual connectivity. And that is taking us to the infinity, right? Again, leading lines, trying to focus. So the moment you watch this image, by default your eyes go to that particular person. By default your eyes are taken to that particular person, right? So that is what leading line does, and you can use it in your photography to focus on such particular object. So even these lines below, even these lines, they are also focusing somewhere to that person, right? And you can see one third being used and things like that. So that is what leading line does. Next is to understand and simplify the focus. You always need to have a clear understanding on what you want to focus on. Having too much going on in the background can sometimes confuse a person that what you are trying to show. So always try to focus, and that is something known as a focus ring that you will get in your camera. So people who are holding DSLR or mirrorless or bridge camera, the moment you half press the shutter button can be pressed in two ways, two levels. One is half press and then the click, right? When you half press the shutter, the camera tells you where it is focusing. So that is where you need to understand where you want the camera ring to focus. Now these autofocus points are different for different cameras. Let's say for example something like a Canon 5D Mark IV will have 61 focus points, so you really have to tell where exactly you want to focus. There will be 61 points in the entire frame, and you can tell the camera, I want to focus on this particular point, and that it will get locked when you half press the shutter, and you full press the shutter, and the particular photo will be taken. In terms of mobile, we have this touch, so you can touch where you want to focus, and it will focus on that particular object, and you can take the photograph, right? So that is what happens when you are talking about focusing. So you need to understand that you do not focus on clutters, so that the viewer gets confused about what exactly is it that you are trying to focus on. So you need to have a clear understanding on what you want to focus, and the focus ring should be concerned or connected just to that particular object. Over here again, one third being used, you can see contrast being used, and the focus is clear. The focus is dead clear on what he is trying to showcase. There are a lot of clutters behind, but the focus is clear. And again, one third being used, or in fact you can say this is golden proportion, because this will come like this, go like this, and take this two heads over here and go to this is golden proportion of photography. How did I know it is golden proportion? Because I saw the one third will be somewhere over here, right? The one third will be somewhere over here, but I was trying to also look at the last corner point of it, and I saw this too. So I figured out that, okay, fine, this is where the golden proportion has been used. So this is how the golden proportion must have been used. Okay. The point is here, focus on what you want to actually focus on, and try to defocus all of this. This is where the manual focus in your camera comes into picture, where you can actually manually focus on what you want to focus on. And sometimes you will have this autofocus units, or in your camera you will have this focal ring, something like this. So sometime it is one, sometime it is, there are 61, somewhere it is 104 autofocus points. There are cameras, and according to that it differs what how many types of how do you say autofocus points are actually there, and you can use it accordingly in your images. So this is the last how do you say tip that I had for you when you're going out to take photographs next time. So make sure you have a clear understanding on what you want to focus on. You are using leading lines in your photographs as much as possible. Hunt for these leading lines. Anywhere when you're taking photographs, you will see this leading line. Sometimes even the wrinkles in a face of a old woman can be leading lines to its eyes. So even you can use that. So it's not like that you will have lines drawn somewhere. You, as a photographer, you have to visualize, or you have to know, what I should be capturing, or where are those leading lines, and then use those leading lines to showcase. Just capturing leading lines is not no good. You need to understand to use these leading lines to showcase what you want to focus. What is the focus point that you have, and try to take the leading lines to the focus point and then click. That will have a really good impact on your photography. Then always try to use frames. So a frame within a frame can be a beautiful photograph. Always try to use that, and try to avoid cliche frame. Try to go for unusual frames. Always try to crop when you are cropping. Try not to get those limbs and things like that out, because that is going to again create the how do you say distraction in your photograph, where the photographer where the viewer will look or start focusing on useless things rather than focusing on the subject. So even if you are cropping the photograph, be sensible while you're cropping. Always fill your frame. Do not keep your frame too empty like this photograph. Do not keep your frame too empty. Always fill your frame with the subject. And try use the other three rules that we spoke about. So that is all that I had to speak about in terms of composition and tips for your photography. I wish we had a hands-on experience, because then the experience of teaching photography is completely different, where you actually tell the students how to take the photograph, or you handhold their the frames and you tell them. And we usually do this. We take such classes, send the guys to take photographs. They spend 2-3 hours in a particular frame or a particular subject or something like that. They come back, and then we flash their photographs on the projector or something like that, and then we give the grades, or we tell them how they could have improved. That actually does a tremendous progress in the photography. I have given you the theory, but the practical is completely on you. You have to go out, start taking photographs. You can mail them to me if you want them, if you want me to review the photographs, but you should or you must take photographs after this class, and try taking photographs from a photographer's point of view. Like for an hour, think yourself as a photographer and think what different, or what is it that you can do different than you were doing yesterday. That is going to actually set your bar quite high. So I think that's all I had. I'll be taking questions now. So if anyone of you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer.
Okay, so far I think two students have posted their questions. Um, One student has
One second.
asked, how does
I,
the grid change if we take photographs in portrait instead of landscape?
just a second, just a second. 1 second, just hold on, please. Okay, now can you please repeat the question?
The question is, how does the grid change if we take the photographs in portrait instead of landscape?
Okay, the grid remains the same, but only thing is the frame changes. Let's say, for example, right now when you are taking the landscape, you have the grids like this, right? When you take the portrait also, instead of landscape, you are taking a portrait photograph. Your grid just changes like this. So the grid remains same, the orientation of the image changes, and the focus point remains at the same point. That doesn't change. The grid remains same, only the orientation changes anti-clockwise 90 degree. That's all, nothing else. So the points still remain in the same point. The focus, the intersection remains the same. 4 points you will have. In landscape, you had it over here, 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 here. When you talk about a portrait, you will have it here, 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 here. That's all, nothing else. Just keep it in a landscape and just turn it, and you will have the same grids.
Okay, we also have a next question, which is, how do you choose between cropping the background and whether or not cutting limbs?
That depends completely based on the subject that you are taking off. Okay, so that also depends on the background that you have. By cutting the limbs, what I mean is, let's say, for example, you are taking a photograph of a person. Do not try to cut out the hair part of it. Let's say, for example, something like, now you are seeing me like this and now you see me like this, right? It completely changes the person. So it's something like that, that try not to cut out the essential characters of a human that you have to capture. So like hairstyle, like the ears. Sometimes I have seen people taking photograph uh, of a person and cutting off the hand, right? I was showing you that in one of the examples. So do not try to cut out the fingers or the limbs or things like that. Do not try to, if you are taking a photograph which is going to cover uh, which you cannot cover the entire person, either you cut it from the knee angle or you cut it from the waist angle where the limbs are not cut. Okay, so that is one. And another thing is, how do you cut out the background? That completely depends on the subject. There is no hard and fast rule. We cannot say that, do this to the background, don't do this to the background. It completely depends on the particular frame that you're talking about. My point is, always try to avoid the clutters that is there in your particular subject. If there is a lot of clutter in a subject, try to avoid that and cut off that.
Okay, the next question is major photos are mostly edited and post processing. So, what are your thoughts on editing it as a photographer?
As a photographer, editing, see, it is something, let's say for example, if you're talking about fashion industry, right, there the whole point is to sell. The whole way, the point you are taking the photography is to sell, so their post production is necessary, that becomes a part of the photography process. Now post production is necessary, but how much do you do is the control that you will have to have. Like as I said, international association for photographs have set some standards. You can crop, you can increase the contrast by maximum 2 to 3 stops, you can increase, there are rules. I will if possible I will post that. If I had a session on the post processing, I would have told you how much can you post process a photograph. Okay, how much? But that doesn't mean that you make a guy look, from a normal guy look like a superstar. That's, maybe that is your capability of doing a really nice photoshop, but that doesn't say that you have taken a really nice photograph. Those two things are different. Photography is an art, post processing is also an art. Now post processing is something that you do to enhance the photograph, but not to overcome the photograph. Sometimes I have seen people taking photographs and post processing it so much that I don't realize that this was, which was the initial photograph, what was the moment, I don't realize, because they can make day look like night. So that I do not really I think 99% of the photographers that are there, in fact my faculties and from whom I have learned, and the workshop that I have attended, when we shortlist photographs for, let's say, photography exhibition or something, we shortlist photographs. 90% of the time we just take them and put it on the dustbin, whichever has been cropped or whichever has been post processed or photoshop too much. It might look really nice, we just take them and dump it in the dustbin, because they are really good work of photoshop but not of photographs, right? So photography will be judged based on the lines you have done. These rules that I told you right now, in these rules, nowhere I have told you about, Photoshop, use this, use that, use this filter, use that filter. No, I'm just talking about basic rules of photography. I'm just talking about basic things that you should consider while taking a photograph, right? So focus on that. Post processing, if you can go to the guidelines by Indian International Association of Photographers, there are certain rules that how much can you post process a photograph. As I said, cropping is allowed. Cropping is also a post processing. Cropping is allowed. I think you can change the contrast and the brightness ratio for 1 to 3 stops. That is allowed. You should not take out one part of the frame which can look something different. So there are sets. There are, I think, almost like 40 to 43 rules that you have to follow while processing. So even if you are sending, let's say for example, I think Kabilesh asked this question. So Kabilesh, next time when you are let's say sending your entry for a photography competition or something like that, make sure that you are not processing or editing your photographs in a way that it will get just disqualified. Okay, most of the time we just disqualify photographs which come with a lot of post processing and things like that, so you might not even go there. uh, Focus more on the principles, focus more on the photograph, what it communicates. Try to keep your editing as less as possible, as less as possible. The lesser you edit, the better the photographer you are. Yes, Rohit, I have answered that. Any other questions? I think there
Yes,
was.
actually, there's two more. What gear would you recommend to somebody who wanted to shoot buildings?
To be very honest, that depends on your budget. The gear can starts from 40,000, can go up to 40 lakhs. But Forest, this is a question I get quite a lot of time. So I'll tell you, if you want to shoot buildings, first of all, let me ask you, professionally or at a as a hobby or professionally. If it's a hobby, your phone camera is good enough. Okay, your phone camera is more than good enough if it is just a hobby. If it is something professional, then maybe you should get a full frame camera. don't ask me which company and all that, because nobody is sponsoring me to tell any company. That depends on what you connect to, or whatever you like. You should go for a full frame camera where the crop factor is 1, and where the sensor size is 35 So I'll tell you the specification. And Depending on the kind of frames you will take, maybe you will require a wide angle lens of, I think, if it's a full frame camera, I think 12 to 24, or anything below 18 lens should do for a full frame camera, not for a crop sensor. For a full frame camera, anything below 18 lens should be good enough lens for a wide angle photograph. Having said that, you can take architecture photograph with prime lens also. I do it. I take photographs with 85 depending on what. If you want to cover a lot of frame, again, as I have spoken in the lens module, if you want to cover a lot of frame, then you might have to use how do you say, wide angle lens. Otherwise, yes. So professionally, a full frame camera with a wide angle lens and a prime lens will be beautiful, more than enough. Later, if you are really into it, you can go for fisheye lens and tilt and shift lens, and all of those really cost high. They cost lakhs together, each lens of them. So you can get that. But for a person who just wants to start photographing and wants to just learn photography in building, I think your phone camera is more than enough. A decent camera with a decent lens is, all you need. That's all. I think I got my full frame just a year back. Before that, I had just a normal DSLR and I was clicking with that. You don't really require high-end gears to take photography. That's just a equipment advantage, nothing else. uh,
One more question is there
yes.
from Shivani. How
Right.
can you get a long exposure photo with a stable person and light trail in the background? This is complicated.
She says, how can you get a long exposure photo with a stable person with light trail in the background? It's actually, if you have light trails in the background and if you have that stable person, all you have to do is focus on the person and keep the shutter speed open for a long time. That's all. Because the person is going to stand stable. He is going to be just, maybe, but you will have a silhouette of the person because light trails will be in the background. That means the person will be in silhouette, right? So you will just have the silhouette and the background will move. So your shutter speed needs to be, let's say, it depends on what is there in your background. Light trails of what? Light trails of cars. Then maybe your shutter speed can be open for 30 seconds and that will do the job. If it is light trails of astrophotography, then the person has to stand for 6 hours. If the It depends what you have in the background. So if you have the background moving fast, you can just keep it open for 30 seconds and that will do the job. Just make sure you focus. The focus thing is on the person so that you create, the stable silhouette of that, and the background is blurred with whatever the light trails you have as a shutter speed. I think I have answered her. uh, Shivani, yes.
I think I think that's it. I'm not very sure. I think that let me just check the YouTube one also.
Okay, okay.
Okay, no, wait. One student has posted it in the group chat over here.
Right.
Okay, so like for a beginner, what are the basic mistakes to be avoided when you're starting photography? I think this is a new person. Somebody's just starting off.
Okay, I think I have already covered that topic, but I'll just sum it up in very points. One, uh, for a beginner, start learning to focus properly. First thing is start learning to focus properly. Get out of autofocus mode. Try to understand your camera and try to start experimenting with aperture, ISO, shutter speed, and things like that. First thing is try. Let's say, for example, you want to be a good batsman. You want to try out different shots first, right? The same way, first try out different types of photographs. Second thing, never ever depend on post processing. Do not depend okay, fine, I did not take the photograph well, I'll post process, I'll crop it, I'll do something in the Photoshop and I'll make it fine, I'll make it look good. No, never do it. Delete the photograph or keep it and take another photograph and keep taking the photograph till you feel that you do not need Photoshop anymore after that. Third thing, as I said, the rules just now, the rules that I have told you about, try to incorporate, like for a normal human, for us to just go out and take photographs, it's difficult for us to start thinking like a photographer. That is what I told you, the third module is all about thinking like a photographer. So you have to train yourself not to get tempted by just you saw something, just click click click, not like that. Rather, you saw something really nice, first thing in your thought process is, what can I do to make this come into one of those particular rules that I was talking about? Can it be into golden proportion? Can I do it in one third rule? Can I do it in repetition? Can I do it, are there any leading lines together? So look at that and try to compose your photograph using those rules. That will help you a lot. And slowly, another tip for the beginner is follow as many masters photograph as you possible. It's the best thing that you can do. The photography is a complete visual how do you say, storytelling. The more photographs you see from different masters, the more you will get to learn, and try to understand what they have used. Just do not look at the photographs, but every photograph you see of any master, just try to understand what have they done, what is making this photograph so nice. A lot of times we see MF Hussein's painting and we are like, what is this, right? It's only when you sit back and look at it for 30 minutes, then you realize, okay, there are so many things that he has put up, right? So you need some time to grasp what the masters have done, understand that, learn from that, and then try to experiment. The more you experiment, the pro you will get, the sooner you will become a pro. So experiment as much as possible. Yeah, Rohit, any other questions? Hello.
Yes,
Amit,
one second. I just have one question. This is something that I personally had about one of the photographs you showed.
Okay.
Okay, so remember that photograph you showed for the grid where the sun was in focus?
Yes.
Is that possible is it possible to take photographs like that in camera, or is that done in post-processing?
No, it's possible to take those cameras. That is the photograph that has been taken is something taken in a pink light. Okay, so there are different types of lighting that we get in different types of different time of day. There is golden hour, there is pink hour, there is blue hour, right? So that photograph has been taken in pink hour. So without processing, also you can take such photographs. That is why actually people go to such hill stations and take photographs, and they come out really beautiful because the light is very ambient over there and they have been in the right particular time of the day. Many photographers experiment or research before to know which time should they go and take this photograph, in fact, just to get those pink how do you say, hue in the photograph, or to get golden hue in the photograph. For a golden hour you have to go somewhere in the dawn, 4:30 to 5 o'clock, there will be a golden hour time. In the evening, 5:30 to 6 o'clock in the winters, you will get a golden hour time. So you take photographs during that time, the photograph itself will come as if it has been post processed. Nothing post processing, it can come right just like that.
I think that's all. There haven't been any new questions that have been added.
Okay, in case they have any questions, they can I think you can just share my email to them and they can email me whatever they require. I'll
Mhm.
be happy to answer them. No issues.
Okay.
okay, Amit. Uh,
Yes, ma'am.
Today the session was really wonderful. Actually, though I could not log in at
Thank
the
you.
starting, but then I've been watching the entire session. Okay, so the first week
Thank you.
was good. I mean, in the sense, I got introduced to photography, rather, I can say. Okay, and second week was little technical, but I'm sure there are many photographers, good photographers among our students also. They really took quite a few information from you. Okay, and
Thank you.
today was like, even though I'm not into photography, but then the way you went about it and explaining the entire thing, even I got interested. Okay,
Thank,
so that
thank you
was
so much, ma'am.
really nice, and a well
Thank you.
mix of a good mix of your technical information and to make it simple for the listeners to understand. Okay,
Thank you
so
so much.
thank you so much, Amit, for
Thank you.
accepting our invitation and doing these 3 sessions. Okay, and for the ones who have been watching all the three, it has been streaming live on YouTube. Share it with your friends also. you know it, like Amit has done a very good job. Okay, so let him go to even more good heights or better heights, you can say, in the future endeavors. Okay, thank you so much, Amit.
Thank you
Okay,
so much, ma'am.
so
Thank you for the
I know
opportunity.
you are always there for us for any other kind of
Anytime,
initiatives that we will be taking and things like that.
anytime,
Yes,
anytime.
and
Yes,
thank you for Rohit for helping, and also our faculty Balaji also for the technical help that he's providing us. Hmm? Okay.
thank you, Rohit.
Yeah. Thank you
Thank you,
so much.
Balaji. Thank you, ma'am, for the opportunity. Thank you so much.